This is all about a larger deal or a grand alliance with Russia, of which Ukraine is simply a a piece and in the way.
We hear from President Zelensky that he wants the US to stand firmer. He says the US need to stand more firmly on our side. We saw a post from President Trump saying that he doesn't feel Zelensky's ready to do this deal, and when he's ready, he can come back and sign the minerals deal. Do you think that relationship is irreparable? Also taking into account that Trump disliked Zelensky back in 2019 when the whole impeachment, his first impeachment, started from a conversation he had with President Zelensky.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point. If you look at the confrontation that took place yesterday in the Oval Office, Trump kept bringing up the missiles that he had given up to Zelensky in his first term and wanted Zelensky to thank him. Those missiles were at the heart of the blackmail that he withheld, that he wanted Zelensky to, and in exchange for which he wanted Zelensky to produce false disinformation, dirt on Joe Biden in 2019, 2020 that led to Trump's first impeachment. He wanted Zelensky to exonerate him in that conversation, for which Trump was guilty. So I think we need to step back and not be disoriented by what's happened and think about this not in terms of simply the US-Ukraine relationship, but that Ukraine is a function of Trump's relationship with Putin and Russia, and that he has already begun that policy switch. He's disbanded the task force on klepto capture, established to enforce sanctions and target Russian oligarchs following the invasion of Ukraine. He's deprioritized Russia as a cyber threat, and he's disbanded and ordered the cessation of the U.S. Cyber Command's planning of operations against Russian cyber activities. He's halted monitoring of online misinformation by the Russians that are targeting his base, conservatives, that are riling people up. And there is potential sanctions relief that Trump wants to grant to the Russians. This is all about a larger deal or a grand alliance with Russia, of which Ukraine is simply a piece and in the way.
So do you think it's not going to be long before we see an official deal between the US and Russia? I mean, you've got to ask yourself, why is Donald Trump prepared to burn so many bridges with the Europeans, with Ukraine? For what exactly? What do you think is driving him?
Well, look at what he said in the meeting. The meeting is very revealing. And people should go back to what Trump's own words were. He says, you want me to say really terrible things about Putin and then say, hi, Vladimir, how are we doing on the deal? It doesn't work that way. And then he said, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him in Russia, 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 Russia. So what did he go through with Putin? And he says that he made deals with Putin. In the first term, there was no formal agreement that he ever made with Russia. What were the deals? We don't know.
What happens to relationships between the UK and the US, between Europe and the US, if the US in a few months' time announce a deal between themselves and Russia? How do Western leaders and leaders from across the world deal with the US if it goes into business with the Russian administration?
Well, Trump is desperate to go into business with Putin, and he always has been ever since he tried to negotiate a hotel deal in Moscow, going back decades, and all the way through the 2016 campaign. And he's wanted to do all sorts of deals since. And we don't know how much money he's taken from Putin after he was cut off by the New York bankers in the early 90s and never given loans again from Wall Street, and yet got subsidized through Deutsche Bank. It probably is a conduit. So we have no idea what's in the background here. But as for the Europeans, the new German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has stated that France and Britain should extend their nuclear umbrella to Germany and to all the NATO countries, given the Trump position right now. So I think that that might be almost inevitable. The truth is that umbrella is already extended through Article 5 of the NATO treaty, but it may need to be restated, and there may need to be some new formulation through a Europe Defense Pact involving Britain of a NATO 2.0 if Trump proceeds further with his desire to make a deal apart from everything else with Putin.
Sidney, as a former senior advisor to the Clinton administration, I'm assuming that you still have an ear to the ground with the Democrats. Where are the Democrats? I have not heard anything from the Democratic side. Now, perhaps I've missed something, but where are the big Democrat voices after that meeting yesterday? What's the strategy from the Democrats?
Well, I think you heard them on American TV. There were a lot of them out there. And the Democrats generally, in terms of strategy, are particularly in the House of Representatives, taking a position before the budget negotiations for the domestic budget here, but also involves the foreign policy budget. And the feeling among the Democrats is that the Republicans are going to have enormous difficulty reaching an agreement among themselves. They're in the majority, and that we could have a government shutdown as a result of the Republicans unable to pass a budget on their own with control of both houses. So that's where the politics lay with the Democrats and what they're focusing on right now. On the other hand, what's going on out in the country is a kind of rolling wave of the public awakening to what Trump is doing to the American government and to the country domestically. You can see this in the spontaneous questions and anger at Republican congressmen in town halls. And that is something that's building. So what people are very aware of in Washington, people out in the country are becoming enlightened about. And it's going to spread and rise over the next few months.
Sidney Blumenthal, thank you for giving us so much of your time. I really do appreciate it. Can Putin's word be trusted by anyone? And does yesterday's display strengthen or weaken the US's negotiating position? Well, joining us now with his thought is Dmitry Gudkov. He's exiled Russian opposition politician and founder of the Anti-War Committee, which is against the war in Ukraine. Dmitry, thank you for giving us your time. Good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for having me, but I'm just one of the founders.
Okay, one of the founders of the Anti-War Committee. Dmitry, give us your thoughts there. Donald Trump thinks that actually Vladimir Putin respects him. Maybe he's afraid of Donald Trump, and therefore he won't dare to go against Donald Trump if he puts a negotiating deal on the table.
First, I would like to say that I'm profoundly disappointed about what happened yesterday in Washington. And regardless of how this dramatic scene is assessed, I can say that the war will continue. Unfortunately, that America is washing its hands of it, and the West is irreversibly divided. And at the same time, I know from many colleagues, from many politicians in the EU, that for now, Europe doesn't have enough weapons to sustain current levels of aid for Ukraine. And for now, there is no will, even political will, in the European countries to reduce social programs and to increase military expenses. It's a serious problem. And at the same time, from various sources, I found out that Putin has managed to prepare in the arm of 200,000 strong reserve. And unless the situation is overturned with a week, I don't know what would happen. But from my experience, and my experience has shown that events always unfold in the worst possible way. So, at the same time, I would like to say that we all, just my generation, we have grown accustomed to living in a world governed or at least influenced by the United States of America. It was always leading the global camp of democratic nations and ensuring the collective security. And we know that, we remember that, and we appreciate these efforts. And unfortunately, America, which was always the greatest country in the world, it seems that the era of it is ending, unfortunately, because now country is driven with the slogan "America's first."
Dimitri, what do you think? What do you think Vladimir Putin would have made of the scenes in the Oval Office yesterday?
I think that he benefited from this situation because Trump seems to repeat his narrative and the narrative of Putin's propaganda. And of course, I think, and I've been always telling that Putin is aimed of having a direct control over the occupied territory and indirect control over the whole Ukraine. So he needs influence on the whole Ukraine, and I think he's going to demand too much from Ukraine, from Zelensky, and likely setting humiliating preconditions for negotiations. That's why I can't imagine how it can be agreed without losing face.
Do you think he wants peace? Do you think? I mean, many people have said, look, Russia is struggling. They're struggling to fill the conscripts, to get enough people to fight. The economy is ticking along, but it's not doing great. Do you think Putin needs this peace deal? Does he want it? Does he want it?
I think that he doesn't want it right now. I will give you some figures. I'm also the founder of the think tank CASE. It's the Central of Analysis and Strategies in Europe, and we published two reports. The first about the economy situation, the Russian economy. Unfortunately, it looks pretty stable, and Putin has a lot of money for military expenses, so he can spend over $130 billion every year for within like 3 or 5 years, according to the Russian economists. And at the same time, he has more people to participate in the war because Russia is the big country with the populations of 140 million. And he just announced the mobilization based on the commercial rails, and people fight for money. Mm-hmm. And Putin has a lot of money. He has like oil and gas, firstly oil, which Putin keeps selling for the good price. But Ukraine can be depleted if it loses the American aid. That's why I believe that Putin is assured that in 1 year or in 6 months or like in 1 year, he will be better in negotiation position. That's why I think he's not ready for the peace deal. So he will be trying to have this protracted, the conflict.
Okay. Dimitri, thank you so much for giving us your time. Really fascinating. I hope we get to speak again